The Hero's Journey, a Mindful Accord podcast, with your host, Rich Decker.
Hello, and thank you for taking some of your valuable time to listen to the show. If you enjoy this show and have been inspired by this episode or another episode, I would encourage you to join our Patreon page. For those who are unfamiliar with Patreon, it's a platform that allows artists and content creators to build relationships with their audience, while at the same time earning enough money to keep providing the content. When you join our community, you will gain access to exclusive content such as live guest Q&As, behind the scenes, and other exclusive offers. And you can join for as little as $1 per month. There's a link in the show notes that'll take you directly to our page. My guest for this episode is Alex Aanderud with Legacy of Results Transformation Coaching. Alex is a highly sought-after speaker and trainer of advanced integrative psychology, certified in linguistics, communication, and hypnosis. He has served as a guest lecturer at several international hypnosis and leadership summits, marketing conferences, as well as international, state, and local nonprofit events. He is a professional member of the National Speakers Association, a founding member of the Association for Change Management Professionals, and a certified trainer through the Association for Integrative Psychology. In addition to his expertise in communication, Alex had worked for almost a decade as an engineer, supporting experimental flight tests for a Fortune 500 company and the U.S. military. His background in engineering brings a unique perspective on what is often considered soft subjects. Combining the skills of engineering and advanced integrative psychology, Alex helps his clients get the results they want in a fraction of the time. This is the hero's journey of Alex Aanderud. Enjoy. Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you for joining us today on the Hero's Journey, a Mindful Accord podcast. We met under rather unusual circumstances, gotten to know each other a little bit, and you were the person who introduced me to the neuro-linguistic program, and we're going to talk about that later. But let's start with the beginning of your journey. Can you tell us about your childhood, where you grew up, and can you share a principle or a philosophy that was instilled by your parents that's helped you through some of the difficult times in your life?
Yeah, so I grew up in Eugene, Oregon. And I actually was born in Salem, went to a small town called Glide, Oregon, which is half hour from Roseburg, which basically means I drove a half hour to get to a grocery store. Lived there until about second grade. Second grade, I moved to Eugene, Oregon, which is the second largest metropolitan. So I went from living in this little town where you know everybody who lives there and their mother to a town which is the second biggest city in the state of Oregon. And it was a huge shift for me. One of the principles you asked me about, the philosophies that my parents gave me, there's actually two that have stuck with me and I use all the time. The first one is anything's possible. Anything is possible. And the second one is the idea that you can tell anyone you want to go to hell as long as you make them look forward to the trip. So those are two of the principles that really help shape. I mean, there's a lot of them that I got from my parents. You know, every rule has a loophole, which isn't something that I'd recommend a lot of parents teach their kids, but it was something my parents taught me. They said, don't break the rules, but know the rules so well that you know where the boundaries are so you know how to get around them. And as a kid, it really taught me how to look at what the situation was, what's going on, and to find a solution, which goes back to the anything's possible. In conversation, I've had people challenge me, and you can find a solution for just about anything where there's a plausible or a possible solution. May not be most likely to happen, but nothing is impossible.
You know, we've had a couple of people on the show that were raised with that kind of philosophy, and that's a big one. I wish, not my parents weren't bad parents necessarily, but I certainly wasn't instilled with that. How has that played out in your life? Can you name certain things that's come into place for you?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about my childhood. One of the things, when I was in middle school, I sat at a parent-teacher conference, and I listened as my vice principal told my parents, your son is never going to graduate high school. The best he can hope for is that he'll get a job at McDonald's someday and be able to provide for himself. At the time I was in school part-time because of medical challenges. I had a lot of stuff going on. I was on medicine for rage, for emotional issues, ADD, OCD. Realistically, I had undiagnosed bipolar, which was later diagnosed. And I was taking medicines that ended up causing seizures. And I was only in school half time. And I remember going home and my mom and dad talking with me, and they said, you've got two choices. One, you can prove him right, or two, you can prove him wrong. Either way, you're going to prove him something. And I was able to really work at it and continue to push through. And come high school, I was actually, before I graduated high school, I was already taking classes at the University of Oregon, which is pretty cool. Throughout my life, I've had a lot of opportunities present themselves. I've worked as an engineer supporting experimental flight tests for Boeing and the U.S. military. I've been a Zumba instructor. I was actually a clown for the Shriners, and I got to go to the Shrine Hospital and make balloon animals for the kids. And it's fascinating looking at all the different things I've done. But when I approach it, it's always been, okay, how can I do that? Not can I do it? And so you start looking at what are the possibilities. A lot of times in life, people are focused on the things that they cannot do or the obstacles that prevent them. But I always look for, okay, what are the possibilities? How is the one scenario in which we can make this work? Does that make sense?
Oh, sure. But, let me ask you this question. So oftentimes, even very successful people suffer from, I guess you call it impostor syndrome. So how has that played out in your life? Did you ever have that feeling? And was it never a part of the equation?
Explain what you mean imposter syndrome.
I'm not good enough to do this. I'm doing, say you're a teacher. Let's say, for example, you're doing your job with legacy of results, but in the back of your mind thinking, I'm really not qualified to do this. This isn't really, I'm not good enough to do this. Does that ever play a factor in your life?
Yeah, that voice plays and I go, awesome, let's do it now. It's definitely been something that's pushed me a lot. One of those times for a long time, I had this idea, I'm finally becoming the man I've pretended so long to be. And for a lot of my life, I had internal struggles and I knew who I wanted to be. I knew what I wanted to do. I mean, not necessarily from a career perspective, but I had uncontrollable rage where I hurt people and I had emotional things happen, but I knew that that's not what I wanted. And so I put on a mask, I put on a facade. But what I found over time is that mask that I put on, it wasn't a mask. That was the few times I actually took the mask off because I was lying to myself. When you tell yourself a story that says, I'm not good enough, you're the one who's telling yourself that story. You can tell yourself whatever story you want, and what you think about, you create. So if you tell yourself your story, you've already done it, and you make it real. Your mind can't really tell the difference between something you actively imagined or vividly experienced. The question is, can you get yourself to believe it? Because right now you're already getting yourself to believe a lie. So why not lie to yourself about what you can do and then go prove it?
Well, let's go back to your childhood with the rage. Was that because of the bipolar or was it something else?
I would say part of it was because of the bipolar. Part of it was physical and sexual abuse as a kid that I went through. Part of it was I didn't understand how to experience my emotions without letting my emotions cause me to react. And it wasn't something that I lost in my childhood. As I got older, I still had struggles with it. As an adult, I still had an explosive temper. And really going through the mental and emotional release process that I've learned, being able to let go of my anger, my sadness, my fear, my hurt, my guilt. But when you look at what causes someone to have rage, they're not responding to the event. They're responding to all of the anger that they have in their system. And so for me, it was finding a balance, being able to identify what's going on now versus what am I responding to? Am I responding to the situation or am I responding to all the stuff that's happened in my past? The second thing to do is to look at, okay, what am I feeling in my body versus what's the story I'm telling myself? Because a lot of time the rage was just like I said earlier, it's lies that you're telling yourself that causes the emotion to spiral. So being able to tell yourself better stories, control the meaning maker.
When you were growing up with all these issues, when you were missing all this school, were you homeschooled or how did that work?
No, I was still in school. I just had homework. I got behind on my homework. I did really well on tests. I was really good at learning, but not really good on following through with the work. I think part of it was I was bored. I didn't know why I had to do 100 problems when I got it after 2.
Right.
But no, my parents, they kept pushing me. I went to school. I did what I could while I was in school.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the physical and sexual abuse? Because I know that for any child, that is tremendously damaging.
As a kid, there was a kid in the daycare. And the only thing I remember from the abuse is a dream that I had that was unrelated but similar. And I started exhibiting odd behavior, and my parents took me to a counselor. And one of the things that they found is that the physical and sexual abuse had occurred. And I continue to exhibit the symptomology, but still to this day, I don't really remember the abuse at all. I just remember I remember the feeling, and I remember how I responded, certain things that would trigger me that never used to trigger me before.
Knowing what you know, though, someday that will probably come to the surface.
Yes and no. Knowing what I know, I don't think it needs to, because I was able to let go of the emotion. The memory is stored at the unconscious level. There's no reason for me to consciously recall the abuse if I have no use for it. And preserving the learning, I was able to let go of the negative emotions. So now I can talk about it and have absolutely no charge. Nothing around that triggers me anymore. And so there isn't necessarily a reason to bring it back consciously, because my unconscious has said, cool, let it go.
Well, the reason I ask is we had another guest on here, Dorina Road, who was actually my first Buddhism teacher, but she suffered severe sadistic abuse. She didn't start remembering it until she got into her 40s. I think that's interesting because, I guess that's the unconscious protecting you. Is that fair to say?
Right. One of the primary directives of the unconscious mind is to preserve the body. And if there's emotions that you're incapable of dealing with, it represses the memory and the emotions around it, or simply represses the emotions around it, but not the entire memory. And as you develop more skills, as you develop more capabilities, it presents for resolution. And so the fact that I've actually been able to go through and already do release work on it, I'm sure if I wanted to, I could do regression and go find it. But for me, I don't think anything's going to come up because I've already let go of the emotion around the event, because emotions are at the unconscious level, and that's where I did the release work.
Great. So when you were a kid with all these issues and all these things going on, what did you envision for yourself? What were your dreams as a child?
Survive.
Survive.
No, no, I joke, but at the same point, I mean, that was a goal. That was an ambition, was just to get through it. I remember in middle school, I competed for an architecture competition, and I designed a building that got selected and actually got built into a school. There was only a couple of tweaks that the architect had to do. And I remember how much fun that was and how much I wanted to be an architect. And then I went and followed an architect around for the day and went, I don't want to be an architect. So wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. Continued thinking it'd probably be something in math and science. My senior year of high school, my sister was getting installed as head of the state for her youth organization called Job's Daughters. And I wanted to give her a gift, but I didn't have much money. So I decided I was going to learn how to play a song that she was going to have the girls sing at her installation, like when she gets put into office. And I'd learned how to play that on the piano, and I didn't know how to play the piano. So I went into the choir room every day after school, and I sat and I worked on it and I worked on it. And I'd go out and I asked the choir teacher or my friends questions. Okay, what does this little squiggly line mean? What note is this? And I slowly learned how to play the song. And one day I got locked in the choir room and told I was auditioning and made varsity choir, which was pretty cool. When I graduated, I actually started my college career as a music major, wanting to go into music, and realized I wouldn't make very much money doing that. So I switched quickly to engineering, and had some guy who was a mentor of mine. He's actually now my sister's father-in-law. His name's Gib Thonstad. And he talked to me about this concept of industrial engineering and really painted a picture of me of being able to help people make a difference in their lives, about ergonomics and helping people with carpal tunnel and create safe processes, making jobs easier for people. And I want that. So I really wanted to make a difference in people's lives. So I decided to go that route and went to Chemeketa Community College and ended up taking 24 credits a term and all engineering classes, except for one class, which my buddy and I decided to take tap dance. graduated, passed those classes, and moved over to Oregon State and began my career as an engineer. Went on an internship, started working for Boeing, and made too much money that the school rescinded my financial aid and talked my way into a full-time job at Boeing. That's kind of how I got started as an engineer.
Did you graduate from school?
About 3 or 4 years after that, I took 3 classes and got 2 associate's degrees. I got an associate's in aerospace engineering and an associate of arts from 2 different colleges. But I actually never have finished my engineering degree.
Were you still having the issues with the rage and the illnesses and things like that? Was that still going on for you then?
I still had emotional issues. I didn't have rage per se, but I did have a lot of emotional issues. Actually, in middle school, when I was in school half time, I was having a bunch of seizures. And when they took me off my meds, the seizures actually stopped. So it was a combination of that. So a lot of my health issues ended in high school. And then it was just a matter of getting the emotional piece. So the physical part went away, but the emotions I still had to deal with.
What was a particular low point for you in all this? And what'd you learn from it?
The lowest point for me, it's funny because I've had a point where I literally had $0.00 in my bank accounts. I had a point when my wife and I were looking at whether or not we were going to live in our car or do we pay hotel rent because we were living in a hotel at the time. And I'd still have to say the lowest point in my life was actually when I was making about $250,000 a year working as an engineer.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's contrary to what most people would think.
I know. But you see, I was such a success and everyone saw me as a huge success. I was traveling all over the country. Boeing was paying my living expenses. Like things were going really well. And yet every night I go home and I cry. I hated who I was. I had no value for myself. And as much of a face as I put on, I liked what I was doing, but I was empty on the inside and I was dying. And that was probably the lowest point when I realized that no matter how much money I made, it wasn't going to fix the emptiness that I had inside.
Why were you dying? Because you enjoyed the engineering, right? You pursued that on your own, but what was so bad for you in that situation?
It wasn't even the engineering that was the problem. It was how I saw myself. I mean, as long as I was busy working, doing things, I didn't have to be in my head. But holding on to all of the emotions and the stuff that I'd gone through, my past, the guilt, the shame, what I thought I was and what I thought I wasn't, carrying all of that. I mean, my worst work week, I worked 120 hours in a week. I actually have Boeing paying me for 25 hours in a day. Figure that one out. But
it's a long week.
Yeah. But it's like, why was that so hard? Because I wasn't happy. It wasn't
with the job. It was all the things from your past that were you still unresolved. Is that accurate?
It wasn't what I'd say it wasn't what I was doing. It's who I thought I was. You know, in NLP, they talk about a concept, being, doing, or having. I had all the things I wanted. I was doing things I wanted to do. I just wasn't happy with who I was being, like my essence. And I had to learn how to love myself.
So what happened when you were at that point? What did you decide to do?
It's funny. I actually had a moment. I'm a certified quit smoking specialist, and I guarantee every result that I offer. And so I had a client walk in, they left, they weren't successful. And she came back in and found out the reason why she was still smoking was her 6-year-old goddaughter had been killed. And it was something that didn't come up in our pre-session. And I went, awesome. And she says my goddaughter, and her tears just start pouring down. And after about an hour and a half of working with her, she was laughing and telling me stories about Isabel. And it was one of the most profound moments in my life because I realized what a profound impact I could have. And at that moment, I decided that that's what I wanted to be working towards. I did a lot of work on myself. I spent some time looking in the mirror. I yelled at myself. I said things. I got it all off my chest. And one of the things I realized is there's one person who, no matter what I do, no matter how horribly I treat them, no matter how much I abuse them, is always going to be there. That's me. I've always got my back. No matter what, I'm never going to ditch me. I'm never going to say, cool, peace out, I'm gone. Right?
No, were you still an engineer at this time?
Yeah, I was still an engineer. I was doing NLP part-time and traveling a lot. And really, I was an engineer, but I was more doing NLP work as an engineer. I was getting people to work together.
How did you discover NLP? And can you explain a little bit about what NLP is to someone that's unfamiliar with it?
Yeah. NLP is something called neuro-linguistic programming. It's the study of how language affects the conscious and the unconscious mind. Really, it's a study of excellence. And how I got into it is I went from middle school not being likely to graduate to being an engineer working for Boeing. And I had a bunch of groups who started asking me to come speak and talk about it. So I actually ended up becoming a professional speaker. I was a member of the National Speakers Association. Actually, I'm still a member of the National Speakers Association. There was a class called Presenting Magically, and it was like how to be a better presenter. So I went and I took the class, and it taught me why every speech that went well, and every speech that bombed. And it was something called NLP. And I went, cool, I want to learn more. So I signed up for the practitioner training through a company called the Empowerment Partnership, one of the best training companies that exists. Went and took the practitioner class. Right before the practitioner training, I got a performance evaluation from Boeing, and they said, it does not meet expectations. If you don't improve your performance, you're going to get fired. And I took the first level training, the practitioner training. I applied what I learned in communication, building relationships, and in 1 year, I got promoted 4 times. Took the next level training. They started flying me all over the country. It wasn't a nice term. They called me the possibility coach because the manager would say it can't be done, and the executive would say, let's send Alex and see what he could do. Because I could get people working together. I could get results where most people couldn't. And it was because of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming.
So you attribute all your success to that as far as at Boeing?
I contribute everything in my life to neuro-linguistic programming. My health, my wealth, my life, my wife. There's not an aspect of my life that has not benefited and is not the way it is because of what I've learned through the empowerment partnerships and the study with that company.
How long did you decide to remain an engineer, and when did you decide to leave that?
Let's see. I worked as an engineer for almost 10 years. It was 2007 when I went on the internship, and it was 2016 when I walked away, went full-time into NLP. So now I do transformation coaching, mental work, and then I also do seminars and trainings.
What was your attraction to engineering and to math, and to, because NLP is kind of it's a form of mathematics in a way, the way I see it. What's your attraction to that? Where do you think those imprints came from?
It's always been easy for me. It's something that I was naturally gifted at. I remember when I was a kid, my sister said, go tell this teacher that this times this equals that. And I went, okay, but if I do, you have to tell me why. She said, okay. So I went and I told the teacher, and he was so impressed. And I came back, and my sister taught me how to do multiplication. I was in first grade, and where everyone else was doing time tests, like trying to get so many questions done of addition before the minute ran out, I was doing it with multiplication. As a kid, I always loved working on puzzles, and I don't mean like jigsaw puzzles. Jigsaw puzzles haven't always been my thing, but working with something like Capsella or Connects, being able to build something, make it work, being able to figure out, okay, how does this situation work? How do I get out of this puzzle? Video games. For me, the video games I loved were the ones where like you had to figure out what the missing piece was. There's something you're missing and you got to figure it out. And it's always been fun for me. There's just an internal, I get that feeling in the chest where it's like, awesome, let's figure this out. And you're right. NLP it's the math and science. What's funny is most people don't attribute that. When I start talking about what I do from a psychology standpoint, and I used to be an engineer, people say it's a huge jump. But like you said, it's very much the same thing. In engineering, when you find something that goes wrong, what you think is the problem is never really the problem. So what you end up doing is you go back and you figure out, okay, what is causing all the things that are causing these symptoms to occur? It's called root cause analysis. Difference is I do it for people instead of planes.
Right. And then also, from my understanding of it so far with NLP, is that, if I do these certain things or I structure my language in this certain way, I'm going to get these certain results, either with myself or with someone I may be working with. Is that an accurate assessment?
It is. It's a matter of systematizing the processes that we use. And one of the things I love about NLP is also one of the presuppositions in NLP is the law of requisite variety. It's the person with the most flexibility controls the system, which for me, NLP, it does. It has, you do A plus B and you get C every time. And if you don't, then there's a process or a structure in the way. And that's where you get to combine both worlds. And that's why I love NLP, is because whatever is current, whatever's working, that's NLP. It's just a matter of, you got to break down what they do at an unconscious level, find the process, be able to install it in yourself, duplicate the results, and then develop a training to teach other people how to do what you did.
Now, what would you say of the critics of NLP, that it's not a real science? Now, my background was in psychology. My degree was in psychology. So when I was introduced, when I attended the NLP workshop, all the names they mentioned in the beginning were all familiar to me, having studied psychology, but there's still this perception out there that NLP is not a real science. What do you say to that?
I would say, and you're right, NLP is not a real science. It's an art. It's actually a combination of science and art. It's a matter of figuring out what works, modeling it, and then duplicating the results. And I'd say for the critics of NLP, calibrate on results. I don't care whether it's real or not. I have a fun example that I like to use with people, which is, prove to me something's real. You say NLP isn't real, but yet there's documentation, there's studies, there's academic and clinical trials that have shown results. One of the biggest reasons why critics of NLP say it's not real is it's not a licensed process, meaning like anybody can pick up a book of NLP, read it, and say they are a master practitioner or an extreme elite trainer of NLP. And then you get people like me who've done over 5,000 hours of study of neuroscience, quantum physics, understanding biology, understanding how the physical body responds, the language of the mind, and have had numerous clients. And I go, okay, if you're a critic of NLP and you don't think it works, find an NLP practitioner who's willing to say, I'll work with you and get results. The biggest reason why NLP doesn't work is you don't believe it will.
Or perhaps the person you're working with hasn't perfected the techniques enough.
Right. Well, it's either the person hasn't perfected the techniques that they're walking you through, but the other reason is, do you really want the change? A critic of NLP goes to see a practitioner looking to prove it doesn't work. They're going to find that because their unconscious mind is going, dude, I don't want to do this.
Right. And then the observer influences the results, because if you that's what you're expecting, that's what you're going to see. And getting back to NLP, this person who's looking for something wrong may be deleting what they see as right. They may not even see it.
Right. There's more than 2 million. There's a book, Flow, by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And in it, he says there's more than 2 million bits of information coming in at any given time. And of that, you process 126. It's equivalent of like a dump truck of toothpicks pouring out around you. You reach out, you grab a handful, and you say, this is real. And that's what we're arguing about, is 126 out of 2 million toothpicks. That's what we argue about with people.
Right. And I think it goes back to the Socrates saying is, when he said, I'm the wisest man I know because I know nothing. he realizes, or even Gurdjieff talked about, we're all sleepwalking through life. We're just, and that goes back to 90% of our lives is unconscious. It's all unconscious. The conscious portion of our life is a very small fraction of it. Yet that's what we think is life. But in reality, it's all the unconscious stuff.
That's, like I said, when you start talking with people who are critics of NLP, I would have to agree with them. There's a lot of people who don't know what they're doing with NLP. There's a lot of people who are imprecise with their language. There's a lot of people who take it and use it for malintent. I'm probably using the wrong word, but...
Or using like a con artist.
Well, not all con artists are, but good con artists probably have had training in NLP because they understand the use of language. But so are politicians, but so are doctors. You walk in and a doctor says, this isn't going to hurt. The person has to perceive it hurting before they can negate it. A good doctor will sit there and say, hey, this is going to be easy. You won't, it's going to be easy. You're going to be done. You won't feel a thing. Presupposes that there's a thing to feel, right? So you start looking at the language that even medical professionals use. They can instill pain simply by the language they use. And that's what NLP teaches. It just teaches you how to use your language better.
Yeah, the language is important. I just was listening to another podcast. It was with a gentleman who is one of the top researchers of ancient DNA. It's fascinating, the history of humans and the different species and the interspecial things that came about, and just how this thing in our head, this 3 pounds of gray matter, evolved over millions of years, and just how complex it is. It is complex, but then it's also simple too. It's like with NLP, if you do this and do that, you'll get this. Getting back to your business, when did you decide to leave the engineering field and go with legacy of results? When did you make that leap?
So I've actually had the company running it. Originally started as a company called Creative Reality. It was CRE8IVE Reality. And I've had that since 2008. And I've just been doing it part-time on the side. And in 2016, I walked away from my company, or I walked away from Boeing and went full-time into the company. And one of my moves across the country, I shifted the name from Creative Reality to Legacy of Results, quite frankly, because it was easier to give an email address. My email is alex@CRE8IVE reality.com versus it's alex@legacyofresults.com. It's so much easier. Legacy of Results also speaks to what I want to leave. For me, it's about the results that we get. It doesn't matter if it's real or not. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Bottom line is, did you get the results? Did you get the results you're looking for? If not, what do we need to do to get you there?
Who are you looking to help?
I'm looking to help people who are struggling internally. I mean, there's a couple of different scenes. One is a person who's reached a level of success and they've plateaued and they know there's more out there. They know they can achieve more, but they don't know how. And the other one is somebody who's at a low point, who's struggling, who maybe has attained a level of success or not, but they're running the same pattern. And it's like, I know what I need to do. I know I need to quit smoking. I know I need to lose weight. I know I need to let go of this guilt, but they're not doing it. People who know what they need to do, but they can't get themselves to do it. That's where you've got some pattern that's running at your unconscious level that you need someone to come in and just tweak, someone to help come let go of the pattern and install new ones.
Now, what has been the biggest change recently? I'm sure with what you do while you're helping your clients, you probably are helping yourself as well. What's some big change that's occurred recently in your life that you would attribute to that?
Well, I think one of the biggest shifts I've had just in the last month, I had a client I brought on for health and fitness, and my health wasn't up to par. And so far this year, I'll just start in January. In the month of January, I lost over 20 pounds in the month. It wasn't anything grand. It wasn't a huge water fast. It wasn't a strict diet. It was daily exercise, daily nutrition, and it was just being consistent with it. And the consistency is something that I needed to work on and got the result. And I'm working toward a goal right now in May to be under 215 pounds. And I'm just keep working towards it little bit by little bit, chunking away. And it's great to see the shifts. I mean, a before and after photo of where I was at the beginning of the year to now, it's an incredible difference. And I'm just getting started.
Can you give us an example of how you utilize NLP in helping you achieve this goal? What are you doing with yourself?
Well, one of the things I got to do is first I got to believe it's possible. So if I've got any baggage around whether or not I can lose weight, I got to let that baggage go. Anything that's connected to how do I feel about myself, being able to let go of the anger, the sadness, the fear, the hurt, the guilt that I have that's causing me to hold on to the weight, whether or not I'm worth investing in. Because a lot of times, like for me, one of the big things was I've got to give my time to everyone else. I can't budget an hour to spend for myself. I'm just too busy. And so being able to recognize how important it is to take care of myself, that was a huge piece. There's a food that I've got a huge craving for. There's a tool in NLP called Mapping Across that allows you to take a food you like and in less than 30 seconds dislike the food so you no longer crave it. I've had to do that a few times when I'm at a restaurant and I go to order something and I have to do a quick mapping across so that I don't eat the food that I shouldn't be eating. And I hired a coach. I mean, that's a big piece is I have a coach who's helping me get through my weight loss journey. Even as a trainer of NLP, I'm certified to teach this stuff. Sometimes it helps to have someone walking you through the process.
I've recently come to realize the importance of coaches. You know, there's so many of them now. In my journey, over the past few years, I've met so many of them. Honestly, most of them I wouldn't hire. I don't know, but I just didn't seem qualified. What would you say to someone that's like me that was resistant to the idea of a coach, and what would you say to them?
Find the people who you think are the most successful people you've ever either met or known, or that you've observed. So people on TV, celebrities, and ask them, do you have a mentor or a coach? The answer will be yes.
Even the most successful people have coaches.
I'd say the most successful people have coaches. I'd say the most unsuccessful people try and do it themselves.
To get down to that idea of that you are an individual, that you're a self unto yourself. Well, that number one, that's an illusion because of interdependence, and you can't know everything because you only can take in so much, as we talked about already, and you can only recall so much. Now, there might be people that are these, like Elon Musk, that have these unbelievable minds that can process a tremendous amount of information, but most of us can't. You need help from time to time. I've learned that, and part of the baggage I've had to release with that is letting go of the idea that, oh, I can figure this out. I can do it myself. Well, I can't always do that.
Right. And I just did a quick 2-second Google search, Elon Musk coach, and it shows who is Elon Musk's coach. He has a memory coach. He has a few different coaches that he's worked with.
Oh, he does.
So even Elon Musk, using that as an example, he has a coach.
Awesome. So how can people find out more about you?
You can visit my website at legacyofresults.com, or you can send me an email, alex@legacyofresults.com, and I'd be happy to see if I can schedule some time to chat. I've got a variety of different classes, webinars, series, and actually in May, I'm excited to announce I've got a new upcoming workshop that is going to be one of the most transforming experiences someone has ever experienced. It's going to be called a moment of impact, and we're going to just change people's lives. It's going to be exciting.
What are some of the, just, not giving it all away, obviously, but what are some of the things that are going to happen at this workshop?
I mean, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to start the day, day one. By the end of the day, I'm going to teach you how to bend steel with your bare hands.
Really?
And then it goes up from there. So it's going to be an exciting, my idea for the workshop, I'm working with my marketing team right now to put together the pieces, but I want to take people's idea of impossible and prove to them it doesn't exist and have them walking away feeling empowered and ready to take on the world, knowing that they can achieve anything that they set their mind to. That's my goal for the workshop.
If you believe it, as going back to Napoleon Hill, if you believe it, then it can be possible. Is that the idea?
That's the idea.
Now, you and I met under rather odd circumstances, and I'm still grappling with that a little bit. I don't believe it was an accident. I don't know what it was, but I don't believe it was an accident. Can you explain how you and I met initially?
Yeah, 10 o'clock at night, I'm working late at the office, and I'm walking out, and all of a sudden this guy from a dark hallway at the very end yells, "Hey!"
I thought you were somebody else.
After I changed my pants and regained my consciousness, I said hi and struck up a conversation. We ended up talking for about an hour, had a great conversation. Invited you to come out to the NLP training. We've connected on a bunch on social and on professional level. I've got my own web classes, my own stuff I'm working on there, and you were sort of building yours as well. And so we just said, yeah, let's connect and let's make this happen.
Well, I attended one of your workshops, the mental emotional release workshop, and it was very impactful in my life. I'm still working on some of those things that we talked about over those 2.5 days. And I would speak from personal experience how great your workshops are. I had an interesting...
I appreciate that very much.
Well, you're welcome. I had an interesting thing come up with your workshop, and I'll share it real quick. So we were getting ready to do the actual... You build up to doing the actual exercise for releasing emotions, and I'm sure there's a reason why you do that. But going into that, I had an idea. Going into this weekend, I had an idea of what I wanted to release. It was based upon a past relationship, but what had come up is as we were beginning to talk about the exercise and what we're going to do, this thing came into my head that I hadn't thought about in years. And this is nothing against my mother, but I got my mom so angry at me one time that she said, I wish I would have had an abortion. And I hadn't thought about that for years. I can't remember the last time I thought about it. But it was there, right? It was all in there, tucked away in there somewhere. Going through that, what was it, about 40 minutes we did this exercise? Was that right? Because I don't really recall.
Yeah, it's about an hour.
About an hour. I felt a change. I felt a shift with that. And whatever was attached to that I had not consciously acknowledged was released. And I will tell you from personal experience that happened. And I probably wouldn't have believed it unless I experienced it myself.
You see, and that goes back to that idea that what you think is the problem is never really the problem. There's usually some unconscious baggage that's causing you to derail in different areas. And I'm sure you can go through your life since you've let that go and see where that pattern may have played out and how it's been affecting you in your health, your career, your relationships. And now that it's gone, you're seeing shifts. And it's because if you let go of the root of the problem, the symptoms disappear.
Well, clearly, I see that now. I don't know if it's just come with age or just with more introspection, meditation, mindfulness. But I clearly see now that I am my biggest obstacle, me. And it's the baggage that I'm aware of, and mainly the baggage that I'm unaware of. I clearly see that now. Now, how does, if you can give us a little bit, how do you uncover that baggage for someone that, like myself, I know there's something holding me back, but I'm really not sure what it is. Number one, do you need to know that? And number two, if you do, how do you uncover that?
I'd say you don't need to know it. There's a process for letting go of emotions where you don't necessarily know what the emotion is, but you can still let it go. And it's a process called mental and emotional release. There's a book out by Dr. Matt James that talks about the process, and you can walk yourself through it, or reach out to me and I'd be happy to connect you with a practitioner in your area who's been certified through the Association of Integrative Psychology to help people with mental and emotional release. The other one is, how do you find out what it is? If you want to find out what it is, what causes that? Just ask yourself that question about 6 or 7 times and just keep digging. A lot of times you can find patterns. When I do a breakthrough session, when I'm working with somebody to help them let go of their baggage, what I'm doing is I'm asking a bunch of questions, but I'm not listening to the content. I'm listening to the context, the structure, and the process, and I'm looking for patterns. And that's really what you got to do is quit looking at the micro problems that you have and instead take a macro approach and go, okay, how is this a pattern that I'm running? And what's causing me to run this pattern? Do it with your diet, do it with your health, do it with your relationships. And a lot of times people look at the problems they have and they go, okay, how do I solve this problem? Instead of going, okay, what would I have to believe in order for this problem to even exist in my life? What would my values have to be for me to even have this problem in my life? Where am I running a pattern that's causing this to come up? They're asking the wrong questions. People ask why instead of what do I need to do to change it?
And also, are you willing to let go of it?
Yeah. What's the secondary gain?
Because I recall during your workshop, you asked that question several times. Are you ready to let go of this? And then we're asking ourselves that question, asking our conscious, are you ready to let go of it? Is it time?
Well, part of the reason with that is I'm going to use an example of a cat. A cat walks into a kitchen, jumps up on a burner and burns its butt. It runs out of the kitchen. It won't go back in. It's scared. And that fear protects it. That baggage that you were holding on to served a purpose. It prevented certain things from happening. And at the time it was created, there was a reason why it was created, and it served a purpose. There's just a pattern that no longer serves you. So instead of looking at it and saying it's wrong, it's just no longer serving me. So I need to get rid of it. How you do that is if you learn a lesson. You go in, you burn your butt, you run out of the kitchen, you never go back in. But if instead you learn that the burner might be hot, you now know to check the burner. There's no reason to hold on to the fear. You don't have to be afraid of the kitchen. You just need to know whether or not the burner's hot. And so by preserving the learning, you can let go of the emotion and continue to grow and develop yourself.
How do you know when it's time? How do you know when it's not serving you anymore? What's the signs?
Are you getting the results you want?
That's very cut and clear.
Are you getting the results you want? No.
Like Dr. Phil, is this working? Is that working for you?
I have a very simple formula for success. Overly simplified. Are you getting the results you want? Yes. Keep doing it. No. Do something else. Did it move you closer to your results? Yes. Do it again. No. Do something else.
Right.
Very simple. Run that and you'll get to your results. If you think about it more, you'll probably get better results. But really, just start by doing. There's 4 requisites for change. You got to let go of the emotion. You got to release. It's an acronym, RIFT. Release the baggage. Release what it is that's holding you back. Set your intention. Get very clear, specific about what it is you want. Focus on what it is that you want and take action moving towards it. That's all it takes.
As you look back on your hero's journey, and it's a hero's journey, I don't know if you've realized that, but you too were on a hero's journey. When you look back on your life of where you started to where you are now, what are your thoughts?
Life isn't about becoming more. It's not about achieving a certain level of success or getting to become a certain person. Life is simply about unbecoming everything you're not so you can step into the glory that you were designed for. As a kid, you see awe and wonder in everyday moments. When you learn to tie your shoe, you're so excited. And yet as an adult, you beat yourself up for what you can't do instead of looking at the 30, 40, 50, 60 years of things that you've taught yourself to do that you now take for granted. If you want to know what success is, you got to find success in the everyday moments. You got to be present and you got to take time for the things that really matter.
Well, you said something in your workshop that I wrote down in relation to that. If you don't give yourself credit and celebrate the small victories, you will have the unconscious mind of a 7-year-old. Now that really struck me and I wrote it down. Can you explain that?
So what I said is if you don't take time to celebrate your successes, like actually acknowledge, it's not that you will have the unconscious mind of a 7-year-old. It's think about how a 7-year-old would respond. You sit here and you beat yourself up. You tell yourself you're not good enough. You focus on all the things you can't do. At some point, that kid gives up. You got to treat yourself. Sometimes you got to reward yourself like a 7-year-old. You got to praise yourself for every little thing that you do. Even if you don't see the glory in it, it lights you up. And it's finding that success and being able to allow yourself to experience joy, being able to experience what it means to feel a fulfilled life.
Well, that's great. Thank you again, Alex. Thank you. I don't know how better to end it than that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the time, for the invitation to be part of this. And like I said, if anyone is interested, I'll have my website available and I've got some special promotions I'm going to be offering as well. And those will just get included in this podcast.
Well, anyone listening, I attended one. They're great. If you do go, you will get something from it. I guarantee it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And remember, legacy of results. We have a tagline that really defines our mission, and it's possible. What's your impossible? Let's make it possible.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you again for listening. And please leave any comments or suggestions. We're always looking for ways to improve our show and make it the best show it can possibly be. Visit mindfulaccord.com, where you can find additional episodes and you can follow our blog. We give some helpful information on mindfulness, meditation, and just ways to manage our everyday stressful lives. And most importantly, if you know of a friend or a family member that would benefit from this story, please share it with them. Until next time, I'm Rich Decker.